think it's a bit of an over-exaggeration to say that an object is actually life-changing. So if I'm gonna say that, it better be good. Now, the Misti stamping tool did change my creative life. It changed the way I approach stamping and card making. I was no longer really avoiding those solid stamp images because I was scared I was never going to get a good impression. These days, I rarely throw a card away mid-project because something didn't turn out the way that it should have because of the Misti stamping tool. The Misti stamping tool actually gave to me something that you can't see. It gave me a confidence in my crafting and my creativity. Now, there's just one problem. There are so many things that you can do with the Misti, and there are a ton of resources out there over on YouTube and blogs. However, there isn't one simple video that compiles everything into one. Until now. Now in this video, we are not here to be debating whether or not the Misti stamping tool is the best stamping tool out there or that it's a right fit for everyone. What is cool about this video is that so many of these techniques you can actually apply to any stamping tool that are out there on the market. So let's dive into 30 ways to use the Misti stamping tool. Now the first way, of course, is its original intention, basic stamping. Lay a piece of paper in either corner, top or bottom of the Misti, lay down your stamp, pick it up with the door, ink, and stamp. Gives you perfect stamping every single time. But in the event you might want to make your ink darker, or let's say you didn't put enough ink on your stamp itself, you can go in and stamp a second time, third time, fourth time, whatever you prefer, as long as that paper stays in the corner. Now, one of the things I definitely avoided buying but thought were so pretty were solid stamps. Now you can avoid stamping imperfectly by stamping more than once just using the previous technique, so you can really get your confidence with your solid stamp. One of my favorite things I love to do when stamping in black is to stamp once, twice, 3 times to get that super solid black that I originally intended to have, not that faded dark gray color. Now, I always love to get more value from my supplies, so you can actually stretch your inks with your Misti stamping tool. All you need to do is stamp your stamp once using ink. If you stamp it a second time, you'll get a darker shade of the ink you have. And if you stamp it a third time, you're going to get an even darker shade. Each time you stamp, your ink color will get darker, which makes layering stamps with one ink pad, for example, a possibility. Repeat stamping is a great way to get some great backgrounds. For example, I place the sentiment on the top of my cardstock, and each time you can move your stamp a little bit upwards. Now you can choose 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, full inch, whatever you like, but you can get even spacing between all of your stamps to make some really cool backgrounds. And what's really great about this, the Misti, one quick tip, is that if you think you're restricted to the Misti area, that 6.5 by 8.5 inch area, you're wrong. You can actually hang the paper outside the edge and it doesn't get damaged at all. Now here's a fun little trick to get mirror stamping done. All you need to do is stamp on your cardstock and then insert a piece of red rubber. These are also sold as mirror image stamps. And all you need to do now is simply stamp onto the red rubber with your stamp pad, and then you're going to lay your paper in the corner of the Misti, upside down this time. You'll see my regular image was there, and then you're going to get a complete mirror image. This is also fine if you don't want both images facing each other, but you need, let's say, a critter to face the other way. Another thing that I used to avoid like crazy was stamping on any sort of textured paper like watercolor paper. Again, because you can stamp more than once using the Misti stamping tool, you can actually get solid impressions on top of textured cardstock. You may have to use an extra strong hand though to push down to get into the grooves of the paper. Now here is another thing that I avoided before the Misti. Cling stamps. So cling stamps, you need to take out the foam of the Misti and then you can stamp with them. Now the issue with cling stamps a lot of the time is the image you're seeing on the back of them, if they have an image at all, may actually not correspond to the stamp itself. It may be a little crooked. And so what I like to do is grab a piece of acetate. Then with the acetate, my surface is protected. This is really convenient for when your card's already nearly finished and you're putting the last touch. So I can stamp and I can see, is it actually straight or not? And if not, I can go ahead and wipe off the acetate and try again. A good way to stretch your stamps is to grab a whole bunch of stamps from a similar stamp set and create a DIY background. You can easily do this using the Misti. I would suggest using your magnet for this as well, because you want to make sure that you are actually hanging the stamps off the edges. Overall, it just makes things look more natural. And then when you have a background full of your favorite flowers or whatever objects you're using in your stamps, you then have your own little DIY background and patterned paper. Don't be afraid to add a couple of little accents here and there for a great result. You can do, for example, multicolor stamping or gradient stamping as well using the Misti stamping tool. So all you need to do is grab your ink and start with one color. I like to use a foam sponge or a blending tool to kind of blend out the edge so the edge isn't very harsh. Then you can go ahead and continue down the rest of your stamp with the alternative colors. This is a great way to get a little bit more out of your stamps, and of course you don't have to worry about pesky masking or anything. But as I said, definitely fade out your edges using a sponge or a blending tool, because if not, you're going to get very harsh lines. The alternative way, of course, instead of doing colors like in rainbow colors or multicolors, is to do that gradient stamping, and that is going from a light to a darker shade. You can do this using the same method as we just showed, using the different blending tool and stamping methods. You're just going to need either one ink pad that you're going to stamp multiple times over and over to get darker and darker, or you can, of course, go ahead and use 3 different shades of the same ink. You'll see that the way I did it, I actually just used one ink pad for the whole thing and just kept repeat stamping to make some areas lighter and some areas darker. There are a couple of ways to get a really great background stamp impression. Now, what I like to do is actually reverse the order. So instead of putting the paper in my Misti, I actually put the stamp into my Misti. I then added a bit of removable adhesive to the back of my cardstock, and I pressed down on the door of the Misti to lift the paper up. I find that cling stamps can be a little on the heavier side, and sometimes the weight of the door, it just doesn't work and it falls off onto your surface. This guarantees that it works. And once again, if you don't get perfect stamping, you could go ahead and press over and over until you get the result you want. An alternative way to the creative corners or stamping outside of the corner of the Misti and still getting accurate results is using the Cricut adhesive mat. So this is one of those Cricut mats that have gone into the machine, but I've cut it down to fit the Misti at 6.5 by 8.5 inches. And so I can now hold my paper slightly from the edge, because we all know that when we stick our background stamps in here, then you'll get like a really thin area on the left side and the bottom that doesn't stamp properly. The next technique is just going to be a time-saving technique, a rotated border technique. So let's say you're going to put a border on the top or the bottom of your cardstock. You could just go ahead and leave your stamp in the same spot. So you can go ahead and ink up your stamp that is going to be on the top of your card base or on the card panel. You're going to stamp, and then all you need to do is actually rotate your cardstock. And there are a few different techniques that I'm going to show in this video that involve this time-saving technique. That way you'll get a perfect mirror image of the design, or a reflection, I guess you could say, and it's all perfect and ready for you there. Now, definitely one of the things that I hear most is that people have a hard time lining up their card bases and their card panels. So why not let the Misti do the hard work for you? So I've gone ahead and added my 4.25 by 5.5 inch card base already folded, and I'm using the magnet to hold it down. And then you can remove the magnet when you're ready to go, grab your card panel that measures the same amount or the same size, and then use the corner of the Misti to help you lay it down properly. It's going to give you perfect placement every time, as long as your cardstock is cut straight. Now, for those that have a hard time lining up sentiments, you can use your Misti Creative Corners. That's an attachment for the Misti. The L portion of the ruler can help you slide sentiments straightly into place. A 6-inch ruler will probably work fine as well for this, as long as it's a little on the thicker side so that it really can support the stamp. So you can go ahead and add these perfectly in. Now, adding in a stamp that is diagonal to me really makes a card pop. It's just something different that you don't see all the time. Now again, the Misti Creative Corners is a set of accessories that you can get with the Misti, and one of the rulers here is a triangular ruler, or the 45-degree angle ruler, I believe it is. And of course, these are available at different types of stores like Office Depot or Staples. You don't need the one specifically for the Misti, but you line it up in the corner and you have that perfect diagonal edge to line it up. And what's cool about the Misti is 2 of these come in the set, so you can do 2 different types of diagonals. For easy off-the-edge stamping, those Misti creative corners come in handy as well. You can, for example, extend your little area there, and then of course you can add a magnet on top to keep it in place. You can keep it in the middle of your Misti if you prefer. The corners are going to really help you get started. So the corners are here kind of meant to help you line things up straightly. Once again, you can stamp off the cardstock. You can remove them if they get in the way and add the magnet to keep it in place. And if your little corner of the creative corners is stuck in the corner of the Misti like I showed at the beginning, then if you happen to adjust your paper or anything, it's really easy to go back and restamp. All right, so I'm terrible at lining up die cuts perfectly, so this helps me a lot. I'm going to go ahead and stamp a circular sentiment here that has a coordinating circle die. Now for the life of me, I can't line up dies. It is what it is. So I've gone ahead and ran through the coordinating die using a separate sheet of paper. I'm going to make a little slit here in the cardstock so I can remove it later. And I can reuse this frame over and over every time I want to use this coordinating die. So I'm going to place it on the top and I can really see now if it's perfectly in place. I'm going to lay the die on top and it acts as a barrier in a way, so you can't actually move the die back and forth when it's in place. Then because I cut that little slit in the cardstock, I can remove the frame, add a piece of washi tape to keep the die in place, and you're ready to go. I get a perfect placed die every single time. One of the real game changers when it comes to the Misti is mass production. So you create an assembly line. I'm going to show you how I do it with layering stamps. So I begin normally. I go ahead and I stamp on my cardstock the design that I'm going to do. Then I'm going to go ahead and add my next piece of cardstock. So then I can go ahead and stamp this again. So there's no time wasted in removing the stamp, relining it up, or anything like that. So you can do this for as many cards as you need. If I need this stamp 10 times, I'm going to stamp 10 sheets of paper. Don't forget you can do that rotate cardstock technique if the stamp does not go across the halfway point. So like again, I can grab this stamp and I can stamp on both sides of the cardstock and really save even more time. Now because I'm mass producing, I'm going to go ahead and line up the second part of the layering stamp and stamp that down. Then again, rotate my cardstock and stamp it again. This is a major time-saving technique. And don't forget, if your stamp actually goes over the halfway point, then you can also cut your cardstock larger and then you'll have a larger area. So you do each step one after the other. Another way that you can use mass production with layering stamps is to do the 4-corner rotation. This is for smaller stamps. So the stamps that I showed you before are from the ton and they're the new and improved layering stamps. It means that you stamp all of the stamps at once in the first layer, then all the stamps twice in the second layer, and then you die cut them all at once. So it saves you a lot of steps. But there are a lot of stamps like these ones where they're individual layering stamps, and these are what I refer to as the older style layering stamps. And these you can go ahead and cut yourself a 6x6 cardstock, and as long as the stamp doesn't exceed 3x3 inches, you could go ahead and stamp 4 times in all 4 corners. It just makes things a little bit quicker. And again, you can just keep rotating until all the layers are finished and you have yourself 4 gorgeous flowers in the end. If you have a hard time picking up your washi tape magnet, this is not a new trick. Grab a piece of washi tape. I try to use a stronger washi tape or purple tape to do this because I find it just lasts a little bit longer. You can replace it each time, but having this little tab here sticking out really does help you pick things up a lot easier. That goes for your Misti door as well. If you don't have the brand new Misti 2.0, you don't have a lip in the door, and the door also doesn't hang over the side of the Misti so that it's easy to pull up and down. You can grab a thicker piece of washi tape for this. A thin one works as well, but I found it easier using a 1.5 inch tape here. I also used purple tape to give myself a hand. So the Cricut mat comes in handy for many techniques, and I like to use the Cricut light grip mat. That works for me. I just cut it down and now I'm able to stamp odd shapes. So if your shape that you want to stamp on doesn't have a corner, the Misti isn't all that helpful. You have to go to an acrylic block. But if you have a sticky backed sheet like this, the Cricut sheet, it will work really well. Sizzix also has their own sticky sheets meant for these, but I haven't given them a try just yet, but I'll link to them below in the video description if you're interested or you don't have one of these mats on hand. So as you can see, I can just stick it wherever and it sticks and it peels up super easily when it's done. Now the next one is to laminate your sheet. So yes, Misti sells a mouse pad for this foam here. I find this foam gets super dirty super fast, especially if your stamps are hanging off the edge. So this pad of paper comes with it, but there aren't many sheets and they get dirty so quickly. So just laminate them or laminate one rather, and then you have it forever and you can wipe off your mess. Or you can grab the Misti add-on of the mouse pad. That works well also. So anytime you get ink on it, all you have to do is just wipe it off and it comes clean. Now, if you've used a laminated sheet, then you can go ahead and do any type of ink blending or ink swiping or swinking, as my friend Laurel calls it, and you can do this on your mat and it can wipe just off really clean. I find it really handy to do this because the magnet keeps everything really nicely in place. An alternative, of course, would be the Make Art Station from Ranger, but hey, why not just use my Misti since I have it pulled out? As I said, it can easily be wiped off and cleaned. Now you'll notice I put a piece of Post-it tape on there as well, so you can really easily mask with the Misti also. And the reason why it's so easy is because you can easily hover over top if you feel like you might kind of get in the way of things or you might not be stamping properly. You're able to see before you actually stamp down if you're actually going to go over the masked area. And as you can see, you can also stamp on that diagonal like we did before with the triangle to make a complete card. Super cool. Now, of course, you can have your Misti designated. So if you're someone like me who bought the mini and the original when they came out, I don't tend to use the mini Misti really at all. So what I tend to do is I keep my custom stamp that I stamp the back of my card panels with to dedicate to this stamp. So I don't ever have to fiddle with it or anything. It's ready to go to stamp my cards, and I keep my mini Misti in my little mailing station that I have. But of course, it only works if you have multiple Mistis and one that's not in use. Another way to keep track of where your paper is when you have to not stamp in the corner is to create yourself a template with some washi tape. I suggest glitter washi tape because it is a little on the thicker side and can handle the cardstock. There we go, perfect fit, and I'm ready to go if I need to restamp anything. Now this is another one that requires a bit of an add-on tool, and that's the Wreath Stamping Stencil from Gina K Designs. I love using this, it's so much fun. It creates wreaths every time perfectly, and so you can use a square card like it was originally intended or a standard size card, it's up to you. Just stick the piece that you want the stamp you're using into an area that's covered by the cardstock, and then all you need to do is rotate your cardstock in each one of those corners to form a circle. Gina K Designs has specific stamps designed to work perfectly with this tool, but you can actually use any stamp you like as long as it's not too big. So I generally tend to use stamps that are an inch or less in size. Now there is a patent pending stamp design that now has improved layering stamps, and so essentially the idea is they are designed specifically for the Misti. So you have all the stamps as one giant stamp, so you don't have them all individually. So you stamp all the stamps down and you stamp each one of their layers. You'll also notice that squares and circles are there to be lined up, and that of course makes it possible with the Misti to really get perfect stamping every time so that you don't have to worry about lining anything up but some squares and circles. It really is so much easier. And this is specifically designed to work with the Misti stamping tool because of these lines. So if I were to try and hover over with a block, that would be really difficult. But of course, as I said, the Misti stamping tool can be used as any stamping tool that you might have. It will work generally with this idea. Now there are a couple more ways that you can get the most out of layering stamps with the Misti stamping tool. You can check those out in the layering hacks video. These ones require a little more time to explain than this quick video can provide. So be sure to check out that video so you can see how you can mass produce your layering stamps using the Misti stamping tool. Bye for now.